Okay, 7th graders. So the next step in our Mini-Q is the screencast, the next screencast, the second screencast on the background essay, which will always be part of the Mini-Q after the hook exercise. And the title of the background essay is Early Jamestown, Why Did So Many Colonists Die? Note that the title of the background essay also is the title of our Mini-Q. So taking a peek before we look at the actual reading of the essay, let's scroll down or move your into your packet to the next page, page 50. And I just want to talk about the timeline at the bottom of page 51, rather, in your packet. And just to kind of give you guys a feel for what's happening at the time that Jamestown is being colonized. In 1607, we see Jamestown is colonized, the first permanent English settlement in North America. But the events before and the events that happen afterward are important to give you each a feel for what's going on. Jamestown is not colonized without a bunch of other things really important happening before the colonization of Jamestown and as a result and after the colonization of Jamestown. So let's take a look. In 1492, about 115 years before Jamestown is settled, Columbus arrives in the Caribbean, in the Americas, on his journey west. In 1600, 7 years before Jamestown, playwright William Shakespeare writes Hamlet. Of course, Jamestown is colonized in 1607. That's going to be a focus of this Mini-Q. Galileo discovers the rings of Saturn 2 years after Jamestown. The first tobacco is harvested in Jamestown in 1612, and we're going to learn, if we haven't learned already, that tobacco will be the crop that actually helps to save the Jamestown colony. 1616, Pocahontas, the daughter of the Powhatan chief, she leaves North America and visits England. In 1619, we're going to see the first African Americans arrive at Jamestown. They will not arrive voluntarily. The first African Americans that arrive at Jamestown will be taken from the coast of Africa and brought to Jamestown to work as slaves on the tobacco crops. And finally, in 1620, 13 years after the permanent settlement at Jamestown, 13 years later, the Pilgrims arrive at Massachusetts Bay Colony. All of these items are important to kind of give us a sense of what is going on in the years before Jamestown is settled and in the years immediately after Jamestown is settled. So this timeline is vital to our understanding of what's going on both in North America and in the world at the time before and after Jamestown is colonized by English settlers. Now back to page 49 of your packet. This is going to be some important information on the background essay itself. Like I said a couple of minutes ago, the background essay is always going to be part of your Mini-Q. It's always going to come after the hook exercise, and the background essay is to create a context for the Mini-Q exercise that we're about to embark on. The background essay's job is to kind of provide a sense of time, place, story, and introduce important vocabulary and concepts. And on that note, you'll notice throughout the background essay a number of bold-faced terms like Chesapeake Bay here. Down at the bottom, you've got Powhatan is bold-faced, Wahunsinakak, which was the name of the great Indian chief of the region. And over here on the right-hand column, you've got Mother Country. All these are important vocab terms that you will need to get a handle on. And to help you learn these vocab terms, we have study decks created on Quizlet related to this particular Mini-Q. So make sure you take the time to view and to practice the study terms on the Quizlet. The name of the Quizlet deck will be Gettysburg Mini-Q vocab terms. And there are about 10 or 11 terms in that deck that will help you understand some of the terms that we'll be looking at throughout the course of this Mini-Q. Some additional content information before we begin looking and reading the actual background essay. Make sure that you are familiar with how to locate both Jamestown and Virginia on a wall map. during this mini-Q, I will definitely have the wall map down in the classroom, and it will be very helpful for you to know where Jamestown is located. If you look back at the hook exercise, Jamestown is located, as we said, right here on the Atlantic coast, the mid-Atlantic coast of North America, and it is right near the Chesapeake Bay, which flows into the Atlantic. So you have to have a feel for where exactly Jamestown and the Virginia colony is going to be located. Back to the background essay, also really, really important to understand that the timeline is going to provide you with important information about what is happening both before the settling of Jamestown and after Jamestown is settled. So make sure, I know we went over this a moment ago, but make sure that you're reviewing this on your own time so you have an understanding of some events that are happening in addition to Jamestown being colonized in 1607. You have an understanding of what's happening both before and after it as well. Some interesting facts on Jamestown today. It's located about, the Jamestown settlement that is, it's located about 50 miles up the James River from Chesapeake Bay. And where the James River flows into Chesapeake Bay, it was once an area that was lightly populated by Powhatan Native Americans. Today, it is a bustling metropolitan area of Norfolk, Newport News, Virginia, and Virginia Beach. Today, the population of that area is about 2 million people compared to about 15,000 Powhatan Indians who lived there in 1607 when the British arrived on ships from England. So what I'd like you to do now, as you're watching this screencast, I'm going to read aloud to each of you the background essay. And you can pause if you need to repeat maybe important points. But I would just kind of recommend listening and then be prepared when we're in class the next day to answer the questions on the next page, on page 51. So early Jamestown. Why did so many colonists die? This background essay is designed to give us important historical background about the topic of our mini-Q. In the spring of 1607, 3 English ships carrying more than 100 passengers sailed into the mouth of Chesapeake Bay and worked their way up the James River. Hopes were high, and with good reason. This was to be the first permanent English settlement in the New World. A strong group of English investors stood behind the enterprise. The King of England, James I, had given the colonies his blessing. Along the riverbanks, one could see freshwater streams, fair meadows, and goodly tall trees. Ahead lay possible riches, a native population to be taught the ways of Jesus Christ, and maybe even a trade route to China. True, there were dangers. A Spanish warship or two would not be a surprise. Also, the English had experienced a recent failure on nearby Roanoke Island. In fact, all of the Roanoke colonists had mysteriously disappeared. But in 1607, these were acceptable risks. What was probably more important is that the fair meadows and goodly tall trees of the Chesapeake Bay were not empty. Some 15,000 Powhatan Indians lived in small villages along and around the James River. They were loosely ruled by a great chief named Wahunsenacok. One of Wahunsenacok's daughters was the fabled Pocahontas, a very real person who would one day marry an Englishman and sail to England. When the English settlers arrived, they built a fort on a place they called James Island. This was to become Jamestown. Of the original 110 settlers, only 40 would be alive at the end of December. The arrival in January of a resupply ship saved the colony from total collapse, but in the next 2 years, hard times continued. Captain John Smith, who had provided much-needed leadership, was sent back to England. Then, in the awful winter of 1609-1610, 2/3 of the settlement died. Remarkably, the English kept coming, men, women, and children. The vast majority were young, aged 17 to 35, and most were poor. They hoped to work off their debt and one day own a piece of land. A few arrived with money, and some would one day find success growing tobacco. but for most there was no happy ending. By 1611, of the more than 500 settlers who had arrived in Jamestown, 80% were dead. It is truly amazing that the colony survived. Those English, both in Jamestown and back in the mother country, were a determined bunch. Our focus, however, is not on the survival, but on the near destruction. In a Mini-Q, 5 documents can only tell part of the story, but that is the challenge. Examine the documents that follow and do your best to answer this question. Early Jamestown. Why did so many colonists die? So after having just heard the background essay, what I would like you to work on now and complete this for the next time we meet in class is the background essay questions here on the next page, page 51 of your packet. What you will need to do, you can answer these questions based entirely on the document, and when you get to the definition of terms in question 4, Chesapeake Bay, Powhatan, Wahunsonacock, and Mother Country, you can use the definitions that are out on the Quizlet deck, the Quizlet Mini-Q deck for the Jamestown colony. This assignment should be completed before our next class, so make sure that you use the essay to answer these questions 1 through 5. You can also use the timeline below at the bottom of this page to assist. And remember that the first place to look when you're answering questions following a document is in the document. Final point on the background essay questions. Question 5 is worded just a little bit awkward for my liking, but just look at the question with me. It says, with regard to age and social class, who were the first settlers? This question is kind of open to interpretation. It could mean who were the first settlers with respect to the Native Americans, the Powhatans. This question, though, I'm asking you with regard to age and social class, who were the first group of English settlers that arrived? So this question is specifically referring to the English settlers. With regard to their age and social class, what were the makeup of the English settlers that were that first group of people who arrived in 1607?